My name is Hannah Mercer. I'm 21 years old, and 2 years ago, I inherited the first place that ever truly felt like it was mine. The house sits on a quiet, tree-lined street in Sacramento, California. A 2-story Craftsman with pale blue siding, a wide front porch, and hardwood floors that creak just enough to remind you that the house is alive. Not loud, not demanding, just present. It's not some sprawling estate meant to impress strangers. It doesn't belong in glossy magazines or real estate fantasies. But it's solid, warm, steady, just like my grandmother. She left it to me very deliberately, not out of convenience, not because no one else wanted it. She made that clear in her will, and even clearer during the final year of her life, when I slept in a chair beside her hospital bed, memorized medication schedules, and learned how to recognize pain by the way someone exhales. She used to say, "You stay, other people visit." I stayed. When she passed, the house felt enormous in the quiet way grief does, every room echoing with absence. I could have lived alone. Financially, I didn't have to rent out rooms. But emotionally, I wasn't ready to sit in that silence, so I opened the doors. That's how Natalie moved in first. She was 19, studying graphic design at Sacramento State, meticulous to the point of labeling pantry shelves. We'd known each other since high school. She was the kind of person who asked before borrowing a pen. Then came Tyler, 18, Natalie's friend. His parents relocated out of state unexpectedly, and he needed somewhere stable. He was polite, soft-spoken, and paid rent early every month without reminders. Olivia joined last. Quiet, reliable, working at a coffee shop while taking online classes. She barely made noise, but somehow always noticed when something needed fixing. We created a system. Monthly house meetings over pizza. Shared chores. Clear boundaries. No drama. It worked because we respected the house and each other. For a while, I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. Because families don't disappear just because you grow up. My father remarried when I was 14. His wife, Karen, came with a daughter from her first marriage, Victoria. Victoria was 15 when she became my stepsister. Older by a year, but somehow always positioned like the world owed her more space. She wasn't cruel, not openly, just entitled in a quiet, exhausting way. We lived under the same roof for 4 years, orbiting each other with forced politeness. No screaming matches, no bonding either. 3 years ago, my dad and Karen moved overseas for his tech job. I thought that chapter was closed. Then Victoria called. My grandmother was still alive then, healthy enough to garden, lonely enough to miss noise in the house. Victoria asked if she could stay just 1 year to finish her degree. My grandmother said yes. That was the first crack. Victoria moved in with promises and boxes and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. At first, everything was fine. Then she dropped out of school. Then she met Derek. Derek was 28, claimed to be a freelance consultant, which translated to long opinions and short paychecks. He hated college, hated structure, hated being told no. My grandmother didn't like him, not even a little. She made one rule very clear. Derek was not welcome to stay over. 8 months later, my grandmother was gone. And grief did what grief always does. It softened boundaries. I let Victoria stay. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I could handle it. I told myself family mattered more than discomfort. That was before the house stopped feeling like mine. And before Victoria decided she wasn't just staying anymore. She was claiming. Grief doesn't announce itself loudly. It seeps. It settles into corners, into routine, into the decisions you make when you're too tired to fight. After my grandmother passed, I thought the hardest part would be the quiet. The empty chair at the kitchen table. The way the hallway light stayed on because no one remembered to turn it off. I was wrong. The hardest part was how grief made me generous in all the wrong places. Victoria stayed after the funeral. At first, it felt natural. She was family, technically. She cooked once or twice, left flowers on the mantel, spoke in a softer voice when she passed my room. When she asked if she could remain for a little while to get back on her feet, I nodded without thinking. I didn't want conflict. I didn't want confrontation. I didn't want to be the bad guy, while my chest still felt like it was caving in. So I said yes. She promised rent, promised chores, promised she'd keep Derek away. For a few weeks, she did. Derek still came around, always during the day, always loud, always acting like the house was already familiar to him. He lounged on the couch like it was his, commented on the decor like it was temporary, and spoke about the world as if everyone else was doing it wrong. College is a scam, I overheard him say once from the hallway. People with real ambition don't sit in classrooms. Victoria laughed like it was wisdom. My grandmother would have hated that laugh. When I finally had the energy to look up from the fog of paperwork and probate forms, the dynamic had shifted. Victoria wasn't a guest anymore. She was comfortable. She paid rent on time, at first. She mostly kept to herself, but there were signs I ignored because noticing them meant doing something about them. Her laundry started showing up in the shared dryer without warning. Her groceries filled more than her shelf. Her tone changed. She stopped asking and started assuming. I told myself it was temporary. That's what grief whispers. Just get through today. Then 5 months ago, Victoria called a house meeting. That alone was unsettling. She'd never called one before. That was my thing. Natalie noticed immediately, her eyebrows knitting together as she set her phone down. Tyler paused his game. Olivia closed her laptop slowly, like she already knew this wasn't going to be small. Victoria stood by the fireplace like she was about to announce an engagement. I have something important to tell you all, she said. I remember how quiet the room got. I'm pregnant. The words didn't land all at once. They echoed, bounced around, settled unevenly. I didn't judge her. I wasn't angry, but concern crept in before congratulations could. That's big, Natalie said carefully. Victoria smiled, relieved. Derek and I are really excited. I nodded. Congratulations. She beamed. We're looking for apartments. Elk Grove, Folsom, somewhere affordable. Relief washed through me so fast I almost laughed. This wasn't permanent. This wasn't my problem. That sounds perfect, I said. Let us know if you need help moving. Victoria thanked me. I believed her. Weeks passed. Then months. The apartment search stalled. Derek's place was suddenly too small. Prices were suddenly crazy. The timeline kept shifting. Meanwhile, baby supplies started appearing. At first, just boxes in her room. A crib still taped shut. Clothes folded neatly. Fine, that was her space. Then it spilled. Strollers leaned against the hallway wall. Diapers stacked by the laundry room. Bottles drying by the sink. One night during dinner, Victoria clapped her hands. We're going to need outlet covers in every room, cabinet locks, foam corners on the tables. She said we like it was a decision already made. I took a breath. Let's talk about that at the next house meeting. Her smile tightened. Hannah, babies get into everything. I understand, but we share this space. We need agreement. She didn't argue. She didn't agree either. A few days later, I came home to floral curtains, hideous ones, oversized roses, pink and yellow, loud, cheap. And on the shelf where my grandmother's books used to sit, 2 ceramic turtles. I stood there longer than I should have. Then I took them down. I carried everything to Victoria's room and knocked. What? She called. These don't belong in the common areas, I said calmly. Your room is yours. The rest of the house isn't. Her face flushed. This place feels like a museum. It was my grandmother's house. You're controlling, she snapped. Derek says. Derek doesn't live here. That's when the temperature dropped. She asked to paint her room. I said no. She cried, blamed hormones, slammed doors. For a week, the house felt hostile. Comments muttered, phone calls taken loudly, the air thick with accusation. I tried to wait it out. I shouldn't have, because one afternoon, she knocked on my door. Can we talk? We sat at the kitchen table. She sounded calm, reasonable. I'm 5 months along, she said. We're running out of time. I nodded. What if I moved into your room? The words hit like cold water. The master bedroom, she clarified. You don't need all that space. I stared at her. No. She blinked. What do you mean, no? I mean, no. And that was the moment everything broke. Because Victoria didn't hear refusal. She heard betrayal. And she wasn't done asking. Victoria didn't raise her voice when I said no. That was what scared me. She tilted her head slightly, like she was trying to understand a concept that simply didn't fit into her version of reality. I don't think you're seeing this clearly, she said, folding her hands over her stomach. You're just one person. I'm about to have a baby. I kept my tone even. You're renting a room. That hasn't changed. But the master bedroom makes sense, she pressed. It has the attached office. That could be the nursery. You barely use it. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger yet, just disbelief. That office is where I work, and even if I didn't use it at all, it still wouldn't be yours. Her mouth parted just slightly. So you're choosing space over family? No, I said. I'm choosing boundaries. She pushed back her chair abruptly. You're being selfish. There it was. The word she always used when she didn't get her way. I'm being realistic, I replied. This was never the plan. You and Derek were supposed to find your own place. Her eyes filled with tears instantly, fast, dramatic, practiced. We're trying. You have no idea how hard it is right now. I do know, I said quietly. That's why I gave you time. She shook her head like I deeply disappointed her. You care more about your roommates than your own stepsister. They're my tenants, I said, and my friends. She stood, wiping her cheeks. Fine. I'll talk to Dad and Karen. Let's see what they think. She left the kitchen like she'd already won. An hour later, my phone started buzzing. I didn't answer the first call, or the second. By the third, my chest was already tight. Your sister called us, my dad said the moment I picked up. No hello, no pause. She's devastated, I explained, calmly, slowly, about the room, about Derek, about boundaries. She's pregnant, Hannah, he said. She needs support. She needs a plan, I replied. You don't need all that space. The phrase hit harder than I expected. This is my house, I said. Grandma left it to me. Family comes first, he said. Always that phrase. Always used like a weapon. Why is it always my responsibility? I asked. She chose this. She chose Derek. Why do I have to fix it? He went quiet. Then colder. I'm disappointed in you. I ended the call shaking. That night, Victoria taped a note to my door. I'll be talking to a lawyer. That was when I realized this wasn't about a room anymore. It was about control, and she wasn't planning to lose. After the note appeared on my door, the house changed. Not physically, nothing dramatic like broken furniture or shouting matches, but in the way a place feels when it no longer belongs to you. Every creak of the floorboards sounded accusatory. Every closed door felt deliberate. Even the sunlight coming through the windows seemed harsher, like it was exposing something fragile I'd been pretending wasn't cracking. Victoria didn't speak to me for 2 days. She moved through the house like a ghost with purpose, silent, pointed, making sure I noticed the absence of courtesy. Cabinets slammed. Her phone calls happened in shared spaces, voice pitched just loud enough for me to hear fragments. She won't even let me paint. She thinks she owns everything. I'm pregnant and she doesn't care. Each sentence landed like a pebble dropped into water, ripples spreading through the house. Natalie started retreating to her room earlier than usual. Tyler stopped wearing his headphones in common areas, like he was bracing for confrontation. Olivia cleaned quietly, methodically, as if order could protect us from tension. I told myself not to react. But then I came home one afternoon to find the kitchen reorganized. My grandmother's labeled spice jars, gone, replaced with mismatched plastic containers. The drawer where she kept handwritten recipe cards had been moved to a lower cabinet for accessibility, according to the sticky note Victoria left behind. I stood there, staring at that note, my hands shaking. This wasn't nesting. This was conquest. I knocked on Victoria's door. Once. Twice. What? She snapped. Why did you move my grandmother's things? She crossed her arms. I'm making the house more functional. It was functional. For you, she said, not for a baby. I took a breath. You don't get to change shared spaces without agreement. She scoffed. You act like this house is sacred. It is to me. Her expression hardened. Then maybe you shouldn't have let other people live here. That one hurt more than I expected. You knew the arrangement when you moved in, I said. You agreed to it. I agreed before I was pregnant. And now you're rewriting the rules? She looked down at her stomach, then back at me. Things change. Boundaries don't, I said. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. You're really going to make a pregnant woman feel unwelcome in her own family's home? It's not your home, I said quietly. The silence after that was sharp. She slammed the door in my face. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake listening to her pacing upstairs, phone conversations bleeding through the vents. Derek's voice floated down once, dismissive, smug. She'll cave, he said. She always does. I sat up in bed, heart pounding. Always. That word echoed. Because he wasn't wrong about the pattern, just about the ending. The next morning, Tyler knocked on my door. Hey, he said, hesitant. Can I talk to you? We sat at the kitchen table. Natalie joined us halfway through, arms folded tight like she'd been holding something in for days. Victoria's been saying things, Tyler said carefully. What kind of things? He hesitated. About me, about how I act, about real men. My stomach dropped. She says it under her breath, he continued. I didn't want to make a big deal. Natalie nodded. She's been going into my room, borrowing stuff, without asking. I closed my eyes briefly. And the laundry, Natalie added. She ruined a load. Bleach. Shrunk everything. That wasn't an accident, Tyler said quietly. The pieces clicked together, ugly and clear. Victoria wasn't just crossing my boundaries. She was punishing everyone for not revolving around her. I felt something settle inside me then. Not rage. Resolve. That afternoon, I called my Uncle Richard. He listened without interrupting, without defending, without minimizing. She's threatening a lawyer? He asked. Yes. Then you need one first. The next day, we met with a property lawyer. He was calm, almost amused. She has no claim, he said. None. Month to month. Pregnancy doesn't change that. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in weeks. When I got home, I drafted the notice. Professional. Clear. 30 days. I sent it. Then I called a locksmith. When the locks changed, the house felt quieter. Not safer yet, but protected. I texted Victoria about the new key. No response. That night, my dad called again. Why are you locking your sister out? He demanded. She's not locked out, I said. Her key is ready. She's pregnant. She's manipulative. He didn't like that word. I hung up before he could finish lecturing. For 3 days, the house was peaceful. Too peaceful. On the fourth morning, Tyler banged on my door. Hannah, he said urgently, you need to see this. I looked out the window. Derek was unloading a mattress, dragging it toward my porch like he owned the place. My heart didn't race this time. It hardened. Because now it was clear. They weren't asking anymore. They were taking. And I was done letting them. I didn't even grab a jacket. I slipped my feet into the nearest shoes and walked straight out the front door, the cool morning air slapping against my skin like a warning. Derek was halfway up the driveway, dragging a stained mattress behind him, the fabric sagging in the middle like it had given up on dignity a long time ago. For half a second, I wondered if this was some kind of stress hallucination. It wasn't. What the hell do you think you're doing? I demanded. Derek looked up, unfazed. He flashed that lazy smile, the one that always suggested he thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. Moving in, he said, like he was announcing he'd brought groceries. My hands curled into fists. You are not moving in. Victoria said it was fine, he replied, adjusting his grip on the mattress. You didn't seriously think you could keep me out forever, did you? Behind me, I could hear the front door creak open. Tyler and Natalie stood just inside, watching silently. Olivia hovered near the hallway, her face pale. I stepped closer to Derek. Victoria doesn't own this house. I do. Put the mattress back in your truck and leave. He laughed, actually laughed. You're really going to call the cops on the father of your sister's baby. That did it. I pulled my phone out right in front of him and dialed. His smile vanished. Whoa, okay, no need to get dramatic. You're trespassing, I said calmly into the phone as the operator answered. Someone is attempting to move into my property without permission and refusing to leave. Derek swore under his breath. You're unbelievable. Load it back up, I said. Now. He hesitated just long enough to save face, then dragged the mattress back toward his truck, muttering insults the entire time. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Tyler recorded everything. When Derek finally slammed his truck door and peeled out of the driveway, my legs felt weak, but my spine felt stronger than it had in years. An hour later, my phone buzzed. Victoria. What the hell is wrong with you? You called the police on Derek? I didn't reply. Another hour passed. Then her car pulled into the driveway. She stormed inside, slamming the door so hard a framed photo rattled off the wall. She was holding a stack of papers, printouts, dog-eared and highlighted in neon. What is this? She shouted, thrusting them toward me. I skimmed the pages. Tenant rights, eviction laws, blog posts, forums, Google's greatest hits. This doesn't apply to you, I said, handing them back. I spoke to a real lawyer. Her face twisted. You can't just kick out a pregnant woman. I can end a month-to-month tenancy, I replied, which I did, legally. You're heartless, she hissed. I'm done being manipulated. She laughed, sharp and bitter. You think Grandma would have wanted this? That name hit like a slap. Don't, I warned. You don't even need this house, she continued. You're just one person. I have a baby coming. This place should go to someone who actually needs it. Something inside me snapped, but not in the way she expected. I stayed, I said quietly, when everyone else visited. She faltered, just slightly. You don't get to rewrite her intentions because it suits you. Her eyes filled with tears again. I can't believe my own stepsister would do this to me. If you need help moving boxes when the time comes, I said evenly, I'll help, but you are not taking my room. Derek is not moving in, and this is not up for debate. She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then she screamed. Not words, just frustration, anger, entitlement, spilling out all at once. She slammed her bedroom door so hard the walls shook. That night, Derek came back to pick her up. They left in silence, tires squealing as they pulled away. The house exhaled. Well, Tyler said from the living room, that was something. Understatement didn't begin to cover it. Later, my dad called again. She says you humiliated her, he said, in front of her boyfriend. He tried to move in without permission, I replied. I protected my home. She's pregnant, Hannah. She's manipulative, Dad. There was a long pause. You've changed, he said finally. No, I replied. I stopped folding. He didn't have a response for that. The next 2 days were quiet, but tense. I knew Victoria wasn't done. On the third morning, she came back alone. She didn't shout this time. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes sharp. I'll be out in 30 days, she said coldly, but don't think this is over. I don't, I replied. She turned and walked upstairs. As I listened to her footsteps fade, I realized something important. This wasn't about pregnancy or family or even the house. It was about a woman who had never been told no, finally hearing it, and me refusing to take it back. Victoria kept her word, at least on the surface. She didn't scream anymore. She didn't cry in shared spaces. She didn't call family members loudly enough for the house to hear. Instead, she became precise, calculated. Every interaction was clipped, formal, like she was documenting me in her head for some future trial she was convinced she'd win. That shift unsettled me more than the shouting ever had. Because silence, when it comes from someone like Victoria, is never peace. It's strategy. She stayed mostly in her room, door closed, blinds drawn. The only evidence of her presence was the steady accumulation of baby supplies near the stairs, like she was building a visual argument, proof of vulnerability, proof of innocence. Every box said the same thing. Look what you're doing to me. Natalie stopped using the kitchen unless she had to. Tyler double-checked his door lock every night. Olivia kept her headphones in, even when she wasn't listening to anything. The house felt like it was holding its breath. 3 days after Derek tried to move in, Victoria left another note on the kitchen counter. I'm meeting with someone about my rights. No name, no time, just a threat wrapped in neat handwriting. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Mr. Hoffman again. He told me exactly what I already suspected. She's trying to scare you. People who actually have lawyers don't announce it on sticky notes. Still, he advised me to document everything, so I did. Dates, times, screenshots. Tyler sent me the video of Derek unloading the mattress. Natalie wrote out what happened with her laundry. Tyler typed up every comment Victoria had made to him, every muttered insult, every sideways glance. Seeing it all written down was sobering. This wasn't pregnancy stress. This was a pattern. 2 days later, Victoria finally picked up her new key. She didn't knock. She walked in, eyes sweeping the living room like she was cataloging evidence. Her gaze lingered on the new locks, the reinforced door frames. Wow, she said flatly. You really went all out. For security, I replied. Everyone has locks now. Everyone? She asked pointedly. Yes, I said, tenants included. Her lips thinned. Must be nice, owning everything. I didn't engage. That night, my dad called again. She says you're isolating her, he accused. Locking her out, turning people against her. She has full access to her room and shared spaces, I said. She's choosing not to be here. She's pregnant, Hannah. The phrase had lost its power. So am I supposed to give her my bed next? I asked. My house? My life? He sighed heavily. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, I said. She is. We hung up without resolution. The next morning, Tyler knocked on my door, pale. She went into my room, he said. Again. My chest tightened. Did she take anything? No, he said. She just stood there. Like she wanted me to know she could. That was it. I drafted a follow-up email. Firm, unemotional, unmistakably legal. Any further violations of house rules would result in immediate action. I sent it. Victoria didn't respond. Instead, she cried, loudly, in the living room, on the phone with Karen. She's punishing me, she sobbed. She hates me. She hates my baby. I stood in the hallway listening. Something cold settling in my stomach. This wasn't about housing anymore. It was about narrative, and Victoria was losing control of it. That afternoon, she packed an overnight bag and left again, back to Derek's place. The house relaxed instantly. Natalie cooked dinner, Tyler put on music, Olivia laughed at something on her phone for the first time in days. I should have enjoyed it more, because peace, I was learning, was temporary when entitlement was involved. 3 days later, I came home to find an envelope taped to my door. Inside were more printouts, highlighted, annotated. Across the top, in bold marker, she'd written, "You can't evict a pregnant woman." I didn't even sigh this time. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Hoffman. "She's escalating," I said. "And she's about to make a mistake," he replied calmly. I hung up and looked around the house my grandmother trusted me with, the house I'd kept stable, fair, respectful. I wasn't going to let it become collateral damage in someone else's tantrum. If Victoria wanted to push this further, she was about to learn something she'd never learned before. Tears don't override contracts. Pregnancy doesn't erase consequences. And lawyers, they don't care who cries the loudest. They care who's right. I knew something was wrong the moment Tyler's voice cracked through my phone. "Hannah," he said, breathless, "you need to come home. Now." I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my keys and drove the 6 minutes back to the house with my hands locked tight around the steering wheel, a familiar heaviness settling in my stomach. Not panic, not fear, recognition. When I turned onto our street, I saw it immediately. Derek's truck. Parked crooked in my driveway like it had every right to be there. My pulse spiked. Not fast, not frantic, just hard. The kind of anger that sharpens instead of blurs. I pulled over without fully parking and got out. Derek was on the front lawn, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing animatedly toward the house like he was giving a tour. At his feet were boxes, not bags, not a suitcase, boxes. The kind people use when they're not visiting. The front door was closed, locked. Good. I walked up the driveway slowly, deliberately, my footsteps loud enough that he noticed me before I spoke. He turned, surprised, then annoyed. "Oh," he said. Perfect timing. "What are you doing here?" I asked. He rolled his eyes. "Helping Victoria move. She still lives here, last I checked." "She has 30 days, I said evenly. "And you don't live here at all." He smirked. "We'll see what the law says about that." Behind him, Victoria emerged from the passenger side of the truck, one hand braced on the door like she needed the support. She was pale, eyes rimmed red, belly pushed forward just enough to remind everyone what role she was playing today. "Hannah," she said softly, too softly, "we just need to talk." "You don't get to show up unannounced with boxes," I replied. "That conversation is over." Derek scoffed. "You can't keep us out. This is harassment." I laughed once, short, sharp. "You tried to move in without permission. That's trespassing." Tyler opened the front door behind me, phone already in his hand. Natalie and Olivia stood in the hallway, watching. Victoria's eyes flicked to them, then back to me. "You're embarrassing me," she whispered, "in front of everyone." "You embarrassed yourself," I said, "when you let him try to force his way in." Derek stepped closer, too close. "You really want to do this?" he asked. "Call the cops again? On a pregnant woman?" I didn't answer. I took my phone out and dialed. Victoria gasped. "Hannah, stop." "No," I said calmly into the phone. "Someone is refusing to leave my property after being told multiple times." Derek swore and threw his hands up. "This is insane." "You were warned," I said. The dispatcher stayed on the line as Derek slammed box after box back into his truck, his jaw tight, his ego visibly bruised. Victoria stood frozen, tears sliding down her cheeks. Not the dramatic kind this time. These were quieter, realer, but still too late. When Derek finally climbed into the truck, he leaned out the window. "You're tearing your family apart," he spat. "Hope the house is worth it." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truck peeled away, tires screeching like punctuation. Victoria sank onto the porch steps, sobbing now, full body, hands over her face. For a moment, a very old reflex kicked in. Go to her. Fix it. Make it easier. I stayed where I was. "I gave you time," I said gently. "I gave you boundaries. You ignored both." She looked up at me through tears. "I have nowhere to go." "That's not true," I replied. "You have Derek. You have our parents. You just don't have my house." She shook her head like she couldn't understand the distinction. "You've always been like this," she whispered. "Cold. Distant." I swallowed. "I've always had to protect myself from you." She flinched. The police arrived minutes later, calm, professional, boring in the way authority should be. They asked questions. I showed the notice, the messages, the video. They nodded. They spoke to Victoria gently but firmly. She wasn't being arrested. She was being informed. When they left, the porch felt emptier than before. Victoria stood slowly. "You win," she said bitterly. "This isn't a game," I replied. She didn't answer. She walked to her car and drove away. Inside, the house was silent. Then Tyler let out a long breath. "I'm proud of you." Natalie nodded. Olivia smiled softly. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Not from conflict, from finally ending it. The silence after Victoria left felt different from the others. Not tense, not fragile. Clean. The kind of quiet that settles after a storm has passed and taken all its debris with it. For a long time, none of us spoke. Tyler eventually sat down on the couch, rubbing his palms together like he was releasing nervous energy. Natalie leaned against the kitchen counter, eyes closed. Olivia stood by the window, watching Victoria's car disappear down the street, like she was making sure it wouldn't turn back. I stayed by the wall, my back pressed against it, feeling the weight of everything finally land. Not guilt. Relief. That night, no one suggested a house meeting. No one asked what came next. We ordered takeout and ate together in the living room, legs tucked in, shoulders relaxed for the first time in weeks. Someone put on a movie we'd all seen before, and no one complained. The house felt like itself again. I slept through the night without waking to footsteps or slammed doors or raised voices bleeding through vents. When morning came, sunlight poured into my room in soft, familiar patterns across the floorboards. And for the first time since my grandmother died, I didn't feel like I was borrowing peace from the future. I made coffee and stood at the kitchen window, mug warm in my hands. That was when my phone rang. Dad. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "She's staying with us," he said without preamble. "For now." I waited. "She's very upset," he added. "She feels abandoned." I took a slow breath. "I didn't abandon her. You didn't help her either." "I helped her for months," I said. "I just didn't give her everything she wanted." Silence, then quieter. "You embarrassed her." "No," I replied. "She embarrassed herself." Another pause. Longer this time. "She's pregnant, Hannah." I closed my eyes. "I know," I said, "and that's exactly why she needs stability, not entitlement." He sighed. "I don't understand when you became so hard." I looked around the kitchen. At the walls my grandmother painted. At the table she insisted on keeping, even when it wobbled. "I didn't become hard," I said. "I became clear." He didn't have an answer for that. We hung up without resolution. Again. But this time, it didn't feel unfinished. Over the next 2 weeks, Victoria came by twice. Always announced, always brief. She packed her things in silence, ignoring me completely, her eyes fixed somewhere just past my shoulder, like I was furniture she no longer had use for. I helped carry boxes anyway, not because she deserved it, because I did. The last day she came, she paused in the doorway of her empty room. The walls were bare again, the floor clean. No evidence she'd ever lived there at all. "You really won't change your mind?" she asked quietly. "No," I said. She nodded once. Figures. She left without another word. I stood in that room after she was gone, listening to the echo, and felt something unexpected loosen in my chest. Not victory. Closure. Life didn't dramatically improve after that. There was no triumphant montage, no sudden forgiveness from my parents, no apology from Victoria. But the house breathed easier. So did I. We kept our routines, monthly meetings, pizza nights, shared laughter that didn't feel guilty or cautious. One evening, Natalie asked me why I didn't sell the house, why I didn't take the money and start fresh somewhere without history attached to every wall. I thought about it. Then I shook my head. "This house didn't trap me," I said. "It held me. It held me when my grandmother got sick. It held me when grief made me weak. It held me when family tried to take more than they were given. It reminded me who I was when I forgot." Victoria chose not to learn that lesson. I chose to live it. And maybe one day she'll understand that boundaries aren't cruelty. They're clarity. They're how you protect what was entrusted to you. My grandmother trusted me with this house, and in the end, it trusted me back.